welcome. At this, we do have two board members absent. We have both Director Stanley and Director Curry out this evening, but we do still have a quorum. So next up, we've got the agenda. So the meeting agenda has been distributed in board book. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will run as stated. So the minutes, moving right along, the minutes have been minutes draft has been distributed in board book. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, I'd love to call for a motion.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 The ayes have it. The minutes have been approved and will be filed as presented. We do not have any public forum because it is a work session. And then we can just dive straight into reports. And up first, I'm really excited. Superintendent Owens, would you like to do a introduction?
Yeah, I'll tee it up here. Thank you, Chair Selesky. So as part of our district strategic planning process last year, the district undertook a parallel process with a comprehensive equity audit, both at the school and district level. And so school level reports with recommendations were provided throughout the spring. And we're finally at the stage of having the final product ready for district recommendations. And so that was distributed previously in board book for the board and public's review. And we have Dr. Katsuda and Lauren Klafke from Performance Fact who are here this evening. They worked together to coordinate the comprehensive process that we undertook during last winter and spring. And so, as you said, Chair Selesky, I'm excited to hear about the report and for the board's discussion about its contents, findings, and recommendations. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Katsuda, who will cue us up with Lauren.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm happy to again introduce Lauren Klafke from Performance Fact. She's been with us. She's a familiar face to us, but for any public viewers there, Lauren has been not only coordinating the school level reports, but has provided us with the uploaded equity audit report you see in board book. And she's going to lead us through a process this evening that'll provide you an overview of the findings and recommendations. So thank you and welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. Can everybody hear me okay? Good? All right, great. So I will take some time to just kind of orient you to what we're going to do and share today. So we're going to begin with just an overview of the key findings and an overview of the equity audit itself, just kind of where we went, what it was comprised of, how folks were engaged. And then we're going to take the opportunity to kind of have a discussion as a board around those key findings and recommendations for the district-wide work. And so I'm eager to hear your questions and your thoughts and responses to those. I want to begin, though, by first acknowledging the board and the district leadership who all worked tirelessly to undertake a really comprehensive effort. Your commitment and ongoing commitment to this work has been commendable, and I know that it will lead to fruition of your hopes and aspirations for your students in the district. I also want to thank and acknowledge the site leadership, your principals, who did a significant amount of coordinating and effort to ensure that there were site visits and surveys and focus groups and a number of elements. So there was a lot of work that went into it and into the process. And finally, just really acknowledge your students, your staff writ large, and your families who participated in the work itself. I have some slides that I'm going to share just to orient us to begin. And we're going to take our time to make sure we can elevate and hear your thoughts and questions in regard to the recommendations. Okay, let me get my screen shared. Great. Okay. So Superintendent Owens shared, this is the final report that includes the district-wide recommendations. There was a lot of site-specific work that was done throughout the spring. And from that work and from the analysis, from all the data that was provided, specific recommendations have come out of that. So just as a recap of what was the process, we had a 3-phase process for the equity audit. Phase 1 was really regarding data gathering and trying to get a diagnosis of current state. And that data was gathered in a number of ways. There was administration of student, staff, family, and community surveys. There was collection and analysis of student outcome and access data aligned to the NASEM equity indicators. That's for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And then there were classroom observations, school observations, focus groups with student, staff, and families that were part of that audit. From there, we went into more of the root cause analysis, trying to unpack and understand what that information was telling us. And that wasn't done in isolation in some room by us at Performance Fact. We met with the board, we met with site leadership, district leadership, and there were processes to kind of dig into those initial findings and conduct some analysis around that work. What we're in right now and just kind of coming to the close of is this early implementation. So based on those findings, sites and the district leadership in the departments created some departmental plans and school improvement plans that took into account not only the goals and the initiatives that were put forth in Roadmap 27, but also based on those initial equity audit findings. So while we didn't have the district-wide synthesis yet, schools did move forward that work at their school site, and the district did move forward that work initially at their department levels. So we're in kind of the synthesis refining phase. Like, there are some core recommendations and there's some prioritization that needs to happen and some focus that needs to come out of these key recommendations. But the first step is just make sure that the community is aware of what those are and where they came from. The final one you'll see is a development of an equity indicator dashboard, and that will come once, will be the first time you'll be kind of taking a look at that will be at the mid-year report around both implementation and equity audit based on monitoring progress. So we had over 3,000 survey responses, a number of students, solid responses from staff, and about just under 300 responses from family and caregiver surveys. And over, I think it was just under 450 Centennial community members participated in focus groups. So these, you could just get a sense of, like, these were the focus group meetings that were conducted as part of the site-based audits. So the first thing that I wanted to share is just the summary of the data findings. You were linked in, did you call it? You don't call it board docs, you call it something else. You were saying the word of it. So, but in the board document place, sorry.
Book, yeah.
Thanks. You have the full report with all the data spreadsheets. I'm not pulling up that full report with all the data in it. It's data that you've looked at before. It's just all synthesized and brought in one place. But what I did want to elevate for you is kind of what was the data gathering and what were our key findings in terms of that data itself. So as I shared, we organize our analysis around the equity indicators and domains that were proposed by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And they look at outcomes and they look at access data. There are a few different ways that we had gathered data. You'll see that for in outcomes, there's kindergarten readiness data. There's K-12 learning and engagement. There's a whole lot of data that's looked at in that. And then educational attainment data. There's looking at the extent of racial, ethnic, and economic segregation within schools and within districts. Looking at equitable access to high quality early learning programs, curriculum and instruction, and then supportive school and classroom environments. To give you a sense of where the data was gathered and which was used to inform, you see the data analysis. We did not have the data on kindergarten readiness or access to early learning programs to the extent that we could provide any findings from that. And part of that had to do with the, kind of the shift and pause, I think, in the Oregon Kinder assessment transition. But it's something that would be worth kind of coming back to once that gets reinstituted and administered more broadly, and we can have access to that data. But all other domains, we had some data points that we reviewed. In addition, the surveys provided additional insight into both the K-12 learning and engagement, high quality curriculum instruction, supportive school environments. Similarly, the NCAS site visits provided that. So what we did and what we wanted to elevate for you is not like whether or not there is high or low achievement in those areas. That's one type of thing. What we were looking at is evidence of disparity, right? Evidence and consequential difference between student groups based on different factors or demographic factors or identity groups. So the first one that we would say for in group B for K-12 learning engagement and schooling, we saw that the biggest disparity that was present in there was for students who were come from households that have been designated economically disadvantaged by the federal, free and reduced lunch standards, as well as students who identified as non-binary. So those were, and starting as early as elementary school, you would see that there was evidence of disparity in students' engagement. The second area is around performance in coursework, and there were some, this was an area where there was some fairly significant elements of disparity in student experience, particularly for your students with disabilities and English language learners. And then finally, in the same area for disparities in performance on tests, there was some evidence of disparity for a number of student groups. And that's looking at your state test performance.
Lauren, I see a hand up from.
Yes, I do. I'm going to get.
I'm sorry.
I'll get there. I'll get you. I see you, Claudia. I'll be right there. I'm going to say one thing, and maybe it will be the question you have. We'll see. So what denotes a significant disparity versus just some disparity is that there were multiple indicators that repeated with the same groups within the domain that made it is how we designated it as a more significant disparity. But I will pause there and Director Andrews.
Thanks, Lauren. You sort of got to my question, but I see this as K-12 Learning and Engagement Indicator 3. Because indicators 1 and 2 are not in this chart, would I assume that there was no evidence of disparity then in those indicators? And are there other?
Very good question. Thank you. So the 1 and 2 are under kindergarten readiness, and I didn't have data available. That's why. Yeah, thank you. I should have put indicator 1 and 2 in there so you would know. But that's the reason why you'll see that. You'll see that again when we get to access to early learning programs. Thank you. Good question. And then the final one is on-time graduation. These were the particular student groups where you had the most evidence of disparity overall. So what I would say in this, and what I want to elevate is the area that we're seeing really significant. It's all you determine what's the most significant and where you want to focus your energies as a district and as a community. But the area that was really the data was the most stark in terms of those disparities was taking a look at students' performance in coursework, which has to do with grades and success in their classes. I'll pause there for outcomes to see if there's any additional questions before I move on to. Okay. All right. So then we have access, our access data. And there's two different indicators that we looked at with access. One indicator that you look at with access is just kind of what is the enrollment, right? What is the general enrollment at each of the school sites? And where are we seeing potential like clustering or more significant enrollment of particular student groups? And this comes from the research base just around the clustering, typically of socially, economically disadvantaged students kind of being a large proportion of some schools in a district and a very small proportion in other schools in the district. And so there was some evidence of disparity at a few of your schools for two student groups, both economically disadvantaged and English learners. Again, this is E, and I didn't put in all of the indicators on here on this one. There were a few more, but they didn't call them out as much in the access area. The equitable access to high quality curriculum instruction, we did have some evidence of significant disparity for those student groups. And then in terms of supportive school environments, there was evidence of significant disparity, mostly regarding your disciplinary data, exclusions from classrooms. That's where that data point was coming from. The access to high quality curriculum and instruction has to do with looking at teacher experience. And a lot of it has to do with looking at students. This was a perception survey, and the work that came out of the NCUS reports, since they were there on the ground doing that, observation of curriculum instruction. So our recommendation with these data points is, as you identify there are a number of these particular areas that are already part of your goals and measures for your strategic plan for Roadmap 27. We would encourage that these different student groups were aligned to those, and disaggregation for these student groups was kept as part of an important focal point when you have your regular reporting on your progress for your strategic plan. It's a number of student groups in some of these indicators, but we feel like it's important to be paying attention not only to just overall improvement for your goals, but for specific student groups that you're seeing a reduction in those disparities over time. The second part of the report is for the recommendation from the NCUS site visits. And so just as a reminder for those NCUS site visits, and this, their report, NCUS, is for the National Center on Urban School Transformation. They visited all schools in the Centennial School District and engaged in observations, focus groups, and conversations with staff to develop their reports. Their data and their framework, they have studied and done work specifically identifying schools across the United States that don't have selective admissions and show a wide array of evidence of having educational equity and excellence for students, and seeing that each racial and ethnic and language group just outperform state levels overall. And so that's the basis and foundation of their research. Several books in terms of like what they're looking for when they were doing their site visits, and kind of understanding what are the best practices in completing these. And so there are three different areas. This will be familiar to the board from when we did our board workshop, and you looked at a sample school report. They were looking at three domains. They're looking at challenging curricula, they're looking at effective and engaging instruction, and in positive transformational culture. They, from their analysis of all of the 11 schools, have elevated 10 recommendations that they felt were most critical to advancing educational equity. I'm going to share those with you. I did want to share that the slides that I'm going to show have a slight different emphasis. There's like some words in bold and different things that might not have been present in the draft, that if you printed it out and looked at it, nothing's changed in it, except in one place where I'll note. So the first three recommendations, which is across the board, and I just wanted to add some emphasis because it's a lot of text. So what are the recommendations? So recommendation number one is to look at ensuring that you have a diverse, highly qualified teaching staff that is representative of the diversity that's present in your district. And so they're talking about two things to consider with that I want to elevate, because I think that they're both essentially they're both necessary to ensure that this recommendation can be enacted. One, obviously, having a strong pool of highly qualified candidates and all of those elements and kind of looking at that. But just as important, and perhaps more, is that the district consider how it really establishes and sustains environments at their school sites and in different positions that will cause all teachers, but specifically racially, ethnically diverse teachers, to choose to remain employed in the district. So it's not enough to just bring folks in, but the conditions need to be there that are supportive and conducive for their wanting to stay and sustain their work. The second recommendation has to do with really robustly aligning professional learning systems at the site level. So, and this part came, some of the comments you might have seen in the reports were just around things feeling like there's a lot going on and wanting to make sure things are aligned and all connected. So here, really being clear is what are the results that we want to see from our professional learning efforts, and making sure that our systems and routines and procedures, our protocols for collaboration, what we look at in our classroom visits, all of our communication is all saying the same thing to really build that culture around like we're an aligned system moving forward these priorities. The third recommendation is to maximize the amount of time that school leaders spend observing classrooms and providing feedback. So making sure that your school leaders are not only, have the opportunity and that there's the prioritization, which everybody has as a school leader inherently is always saying, I want to be in more classrooms, right? But that happens, and that there are real ways that are simple to track and report the amount of time they spend in classrooms. You're going to see a theme in some of these recommendations about tracking and reporting data. But this is one thing, so we can say, how are we making sure that our intentions are meeting our actions? And then that we should really be thinking about how they're using their feedback that they provide to their teachers in those observations to reinforce the work that's up there in recommendation number 2. So that there's a real primary focus that is all of their work is grounded in for instructional leadership. The fourth recommendation, and this is highlighted and starred because there was an additional recommendation missing. I'll explain to you in a minute. The fourth recommendation is around chronic absenteeism. So one is wanting to make sure that your school leaders are very aware and have the data at their fingertips to know which students are chronically absent, at risk of being chronically absent. What are those particular issues that might be impacting different demographic groups, and strategies to encourage and support folks in coming to school. And that the district leaders really should be considering, how are you supporting the principals in identifying, implementing, monitor, and refining strategies to decrease chronic absenteeism? So like, what is our overall approach as a district that we are supporting our principals to be able to do this work? The fifth recommendation is focused on monitoring English learner progress. So for your English language learners, making sure throughout the school year that our school leaders know and are aware of how students are developing in their English proficiency and making progress towards meeting and exceeding state standards in subject areas. So again, you're going to hear, I think there's a theme that emerges that district leaders should determine how best to support the school leaders in systematically monitoring that linguistic and academic development of the students with emerging proficiency. So how are we getting the information we need to know about where students are at, and what are the things we're doing to move it forward? And how do we make sure that's in the fingertips of our site leaders? This sixth recommendation, I do apologize, we found an error in the NCA section of the report that there were two number 6 recommendations. So it fell off. This one fell off in the slide deck. And so it's in the full report. It's just labeled 6 twice. So, but I wanted to highlight it because it wasn't in the slide deck. So you'll see stars now because there's a bit of a renumbering as we go forward. So this recommendation is really, again, around proactive work around the reduction of behavior incidents. So monitoring, suspensions, and also just any disciplinary actions or incidents, right? Referrals, etc. And that you want to think about what are our proactive actions about reducing those incidents, and working with leadership teams so that they're really implementing and thinking about restorative justice practices, trauma-informed care, mediation. What are the practices that are in place? Then there's 4 more, and then we're nearly to it. I know it's there's a number here. So the 7th recommendation is just an overall commitment to outstanding learning outcomes for every single racial, ethnic, income, language group served. And really this is around school leaders working with, and district leaders working with their staff to develop a sense of collective efficacy and belief that we can improve and have extraordinary learning results for absolutely every student who's in our school system. And that is an imperative precursor in some ways to making sure that our students see themselves, which goes into recommendation number 8, as young scholars who are capable, right? So the 8th recommendation goes into really agreeing upon and implement what is our strategy, right? What is our strategy around helping our students perceive themselves as young scholars who are capable of learning challenging academic content? So these are kind of our 2 belief-based recommendations, I would say. Both what's the adult sense of collective efficacy, we can do it, and we believe and we'll get there, and our kids, like, we believe we can do it. So this particular 8, 9, and 10, these particular recommendations were really a very focused recommendation for a subset of schools in particular. So there's some thinking around how the district might also prioritize working with the particular schools where these were noted as being essential. Recommendation number 9 is identification and elevation of a very small number of critical academic standards. So focusing in on just a few standards in math, English language arts, and science that, as I would phrase it, that the district and the principals and the teachers and everybody just goes all in on, as a way, I think, in a sense, it's almost a strategy to build that collective efficacy, to build that sense around the scholars seeing themselves as capable and able to learn those standards. So rather than thinking broad brush around all of the things that there's work to do, right, there around academic outcomes, but to really hone in on just a real few small things to have significant traction. And then the last one is similar, but it's around the idea of instruction, is to really think about having just like a very granular focus on 2 instructional practices. And so, and that really having intensive efforts around, so it's sort of like how we do, so to speak, like as Centennial, like this is how we do school. And these are 2 practices that like, we're just gonna knock out of the park. And everybody will know that as part of like how we do our work together. So of these 10 recommendations in the report, excuse me, you'll see that, the recommendation is to review and select. There's obviously, you can't work on everything all at once. There, some prioritization. And that being said, and I think that I know that Superintendent Owens and others can speak to it. There are a number of things that have been elevated that were already present and identified in your strategic plan, and some that maybe weren't as prominent yet, but that could be a focus of additional efforts. So I would like to pause there, and I just wanted to open for some Q&A around the recommendations before we do the final slides here.
Thank you very much, Lauren. That was great. Opening it up for questions. One thing that comes to my mind right off is when there were the 5 of 11 and 8 of 11 schools, is there overlap in those schools? Do we find that the schools are for that two instructional focus things, right? Is that looking at all of the elementary schools are struggling with those, or do we see that there's any type of patterns there?
What you will see, I think, is that there's some correlation in terms of the students' overall survey results in terms of their perception of some of those areas. You'll see some correlation in that data. And you'll see some correlation, but not all the time, in terms of the state testing results. So what I would say is that in some cases, what I was seeing is that if there were 8 out of 11 schools that was recommendation about those 2 instructional practices, and I would suggest that that's indicative of across the board. That's basically across the board. And I think that based on what we're seeing in the disparities engagement, even though it might not have been the most significant finding at some schools, that there's strength at some schools to learn from around the focusing on our kids seeing themselves as young scholars. Yeah. I think that was what was the most consistent finding within it, was that there are places where you had stronger evidence of these characteristics that were more present in more classrooms, but every school had an element in a classroom where something was present to build on. So I don't want to cast it in this this light that there's nothing present in these 5 schools, but it was more about to what extent is it more pervasive, more than 50% of classrooms showed it. Is that helpful?
Thank you. It is. Director Shields, go ahead.
I figure out how to put my hand down. That's always a big challenge for me, is figuring out this stuff. So there's 10 recommendations. We're looking at all of them that they're important and critical to the success of our students. That's a given. And yet we can't do all things at all times. And the numbering of the recommendations then doesn't imply anything about its order in terms of the way the district is moving forward. It's just, these are the things, excuse me, that have collectively come from the studies. So then what you're asking the board to do is clarify what each of these recommendations are, correct? In terms of any questions that we have about each recommendation.
If you have any questions about the report or things, yeah.
Okay, and then at a later time, we'll be having these discussions about where are we on the continuum. Recommendation 8 is our most important, or is that a part of the process? That's I guess it's running in my mind.
Yeah. So part of my recommended next steps, right, is that, and I'll put that slide up because that might be helpful. New slide alert. So the first thing is to think about these recommendations to review the existing plans. So the school site plans, the department plans, and to confirm and elevate what are we already in at? What do we have something in place for? What's already moving, etc. And I think that Superintendent Owens might be able to speak a little bit to some of these at some point. But for the plan to this continued engagement around with Roadmap 27, we have done an initial crosswalk to what was already present in the plan in Roadmap 27. and identified things that we already started moving, like there's some work done, but we're still at the very beginning, right, of implementing that plan itself. So my recommendation is going to be that there's engagement around there's continued engagement around the plan and some prioritization and sequencing of those recommendations. And I think anyone probably on the cabinet could speak to, like, well, I see that we're working on that, or I see that we're working on that, and I see that we're working on that. And so I think that the key thing is going to be to really bring a disciplined focus to just like it's sort of saying, choose 2 standards, choose 2 instructional practices. My recommendation is like, choose 2. Doesn't mean you're not going to keep working, moving forward thing, but thing that you were just going to knock out of the park to get some traction, so that you can start to build that sense of like, we can do this, we are doing this work. And I would suggest that once those, the process is, determined and folks identify what those prioritized areas are, that you as a board would say, okay, what's your plan, right? And what is the data you're going to be sharing back with us to let you know that you're implementing?
Then may I have a follow-up question, Chair? We do have an equity committee group that is going to be working. And so certainly these people that are being engaged in that process are going to put in a lot of time and effort in that. So you certainly want to honor that time and effort. So my question is the timing for which the board may have an opinion about where focus is, when we know committee work is being done, and they too are really honing in on that. I don't kind of want to, I'm concerned about jumping the gun because of this other parallel process that's going on. So I think I need to know for us as a board where we have a general awareness, we're going to start focusing on this, but where do we converge with the information and the work of that equity team, so that we aren't already imposing something, rather than having a greater understanding from the people who are practicing, who are the practitioners in our classrooms and our community members as well. So that was my other process question. So thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Kutzer, did you want to say anything to that, or?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to be made, and we don't have it explicitly mapped out yet, but there is intention to bring forth the input and ideas from the equity committee based on the district-wide equity audit report. As Pam, Director Shields knows, that we actually reviewed it in great detail at our last equity leadership team meeting, and we've just begun to dive in, and I imagine in the next couple of meetings we'll get to the meat of it, and they'll be providing some input in terms of what they see could be priorities for the district. Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Andrews.
Thank you. So I was really impressed. I thought that the whole report and the summary information was really good. I'm sorry, I did not notice that there were 10 recommendations and there was a double 6, but oh well. One of the things that I kept asking myself as I was looking through the data is, well, how does Centennial compare to other districts in the state? And sure enough, there were tables comparing to what the Oregon State average was in a variety of areas, including not just test scores, but absenteeism and some of those kinds of things. And this is the comment. I'm hoping that whoever decides or proposes to us what we're going to emphasize, it sounds like it's going to be a proposal back to the board, or a strong recommendation to the board that this is what we pursue this year or something like that, that they pay particular attention to the differences from the state averages in particular things. But of course, as I know, not everything is measured that there's comparisons to state data, but the things that were kind of disappointing for me, like the chronic absenteeism rate is so much higher at Centennial. And I think it was like 10 points or something higher. Anyway, so that's just my comment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Lynn.
I guess just echoing what Vice Chair Shields says, I'm kind of really looking forward to kind of like the district response to a lot of things that are mentioned, particularly in the detailed goals at the end of the longer report. Because, of course I have questions, I have comments, and, we want to dig into some of these disparities. But I would love to hear what the district has already been working on, where it's finding challenges responding to some of these things. Like I see custodial and the, just the cleanliness of bathrooms mentioned in one of them again. So, but I don't want to jump on that. I would love to hear what the district response is first. And so I'm just wondering, are we going to kind of get into that here soon, or is it kind of might get caught up in a longer process where, it's half a year till we're addressing some of those things?
I can take an initial run at that. Good comment, Director Lynn. What I would say is that Dr. Katsuda and I met with Lauren yesterday. We went through an initial crosswalk of the various degrees to which the equity audit recommendations are already existing in our plan. And with some recommendations, they're there. With some recommendations, they're not. And then there's anywhere in between. And so, what we'll be doing is, and it was reflected on the slide that Lauren had put up, is to work with our cabinet, our equity team, and principals to do a crosswalk of our existing efforts and to further refine our efforts for this year. Keeping in mind that we have a 4-year plan and there's, a limit to what we can put in play at once. And, people, and when I say people, our staff in general, are already expressing some levels of feeling like there's a lot that's being put into play this year. And so we want to be cognizant to whatever strategies are selected, hopefully are complementing the existing efforts and not having us do a hard pivot in a different direction. And then thinking about how to space out our actions over the course of our 4-year plan so that they're sustainable and manageable. So those are some initial thoughts. To your direct point, and I realize that you're probably using this as an example of the broader set, but for the custodial, for example, individual schools were receiving these reports throughout the spring. And so that was one of the things that we knew was going to be a district recommendation, was around cleanliness of schools. And that's something that Director Southerton and I jumped on early, knowing that that was going to be included. And so, as you may recall, in the budget this year, there was an upping of custodial throughout the district in terms of our FTE that was allocated, so that we could be closer, if not at, the square footage recommendations per industry standard. We also implemented the classroom improvement fund, and we also have the bond efforts that are happening. And so there's a few things that are already in play with respect to that recommendation. So even though there's process steps that are outlined in Lauren's recommendation and that we intend to do, we also don't want process to get in the way of low-hanging fruit in terms of things that we can put into action right away that we know are good. And, one example would be a recommendation about principals tracking the time spent in classroom. I don't need a committee to be able to tell me that we can put that into play. It's fairly simple in terms of putting a procedure in place, things of that sort. So I know that response was maybe a little bit wandering, but those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, it was kind of the custodial thing was just an example of other things, but thanks for your response.
Other things coming up for folks?
I'll go, if you don't mind. My thoughts, I'm a very raw. Centennial's great, and seeing the data that we saw was a little bit humbling. to be quite honest, and I look forward to seeing how we can prioritize and get some of these things changed, because from what I'm seeing from this data, we are not meeting the needs of our students and our community and our family. And that is our common goal that we have with each other. And, you know, let me know, let the board know, we got to figure this out. And I understand that some different recommendations are going to have different timelines, but man, we need to do something different, because whatever we've done in the past hasn't worked. And that's very evident by this data that we see. So, yeah, we can do it together, and let us know where we can help. And let's start taking care of this and start adjusting our practices.
Thank you, Director Harden. I think that I just want to echo that there's definitely some humbling things in the report. There were some aha moments in the report. And there's a lot tucked in there. You guys have done a fantastic job of identifying areas of improvement needed and coming up with recommendations. I do want to draw attention to one recommendation in particular that I think is going to be pretty important. And if you look, it's under recommendation 3, that communication from school leadership. There's a sentence in the second paragraph that I highlighted that I feel really speaks to some of the issues going on in the district right now. The one, it says feedback mechanisms should be provided to create channels for staff to ask questions, provide feedback, and express concerns regarding school initiatives. And I think that really speaks to the amount of things that we're trying to take on as a district, and really trying to ensure that our teachers and our staff and everyone really understand the intention behind why we're doing these things. And like that we can hear them too, right? Yeah. I just wanted to, when I was reading through it, that one really stood out to me. Yes, Vice Chair Shields.
No disagreement there, but I'm very literal and linear. And so going through the recommendations, like the slide deck we just went through, and then you saying, Chair Slutsky, about, recommendation 3, and I'm looking at recommendation 3 and I'm saying, I don't see it. It's because we've got 2 documents going on here. And that drives me up a wall because I'm trying to figure out which one are we talking about? So I get what you're saying. At first I was confused a little bit. I went, oh, no, that must be the big, the other report. So in any way that we can help ourselves or me with this kind of crosswalking a bit, I am getting myself a little confused, which speaks to what you were saying also, right? There's so many things that are going on.
And I think it's the same, that's the recommendation that maximize the amount of time school leaders spend observing classrooms, but that's just the much more, I'm speaking from the much more detailed, these are a lot of the strategies that we recommend in order for you to get there, instead of just the overarching goal. But yeah, there's a lot to take in. And I just, I'm really excited to get to dig into this and support the district as we really identify. I want to also say that I appreciate the district leadership for being willing to be vulnerable and really do this equity audit, do it well, and face things that might be hard for us to look at. But we're never going to get better unless we can identify the areas that we can grow in. And so what you've provided us with, Lauren, is a really great plan. And yeah, as a board, I look forward to doing what I can, supporting when I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Yeah.
I think that sums up the
Great.
presentation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I'll see you soon. Take good care.
Yes. Next up, we've got report on Division 22 standards. Superintendent Owens, you want to introduce that one?
Yeah, we have our Division 22 standards report, which is an annual report to the board. It reflects the various state statutes that have to do with how we do school, and it's pretty all-encompassing and covers a lot of different facets of school operations, instruction, and so forth. That report, as I said last year, was traditionally due in February. And so that report was actually moved up to October by the state. They wanted a reflection on the previous year's efforts closer to the previous year. And so that's been a change in practice for the last couple of years. What you'll see this evening, and at the risk of stealing Dr. Katsuda's thunder here, what you'll see this evening is a reflection of our compliance with most, but not all standards. And so there are a couple of standards that we will dive into a little bit more closely, so that the board has an understanding of why we've marked ourselves out of compliance in those areas and what we intend to do to rectify that so that we can bring ourselves into compliance. So without further ado, I will have Dr. Katsuda go ahead and lead us through.
Excellent. Thank you very much. See, I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that? Yep, excellent. So like Superintendent Owens said, I'll be presenting on Division 22 standards assurances for last school year. Starting with a brief overview of what the standards and assurances are, the purpose and structure of the standards, and the process districts must follow if they are out of compliance. And if at any point there are questions, please stop me. And I can't see everyone on my screen while I'm projecting. So if someone can let me know if there are any hands raised.
I can help monitor that.
Great, thanks. So the name Division 22 is pretty abstract and can be confusing for people who are not familiar with administrative rules and how they're organized. All rules adopted by the State Board of Education go into Chapter 581, which is ODE's agency number. There are 26 divisions within that chapter that rules can be assigned to. When rules are assigned to Division 22, they become part of Oregon's standards for elementary and secondary schools. The educational standards that either the Oregon legislature or the state board has determined must be met in order to be a standard school district. Compliance with Division 22 standards ensure that every student in Oregon public schools is provided with a baseline level of service that meets the standards set by the state. These standards are not only the requirement that districts must adhere to, but they're monitored and compliance is tied to the state school fund monies. So this report is part of the Division 22 standards assurances process, which is required by statute. The assurances process is a combined local and state accountability model that acknowledges the importance of local school board, which has broad-ranging authority under Oregon's local control model, as well as direct reporting to ODE. Districts are required to report to the community in a board meeting, thus this board meeting, and post the report on the district website. Districts must then submit assurances to Oregon Department of Education. For each rule, the district either certifies that it's in compliance or states that the district is out of compliance and proposes corrective action to be in compliance. The fall term reporting schedule, like Superintendent Owens said, aligns well with the rhythm of the school year calendar, as it prompts districts to reflect at the close of the school year on areas in need of attention, and then plan for reporting to the board on compliance and any corrective action plans in September or October, and then to ODE in November. And once ODE has received all the assurances, they go through a process of reviewing them and then follow up with districts that have self-reported non-compliance. So why is this an important process? Well, Division 22 signals the school districts and ODE's joint commitment to providing a high quality educational experience and equitable equitable opportunities for all students in our care. As part of the shared responsibility to provide quality service for our students and communities, this system promotes reciprocal accountability between the districts, their local school boards, and the Oregon Department of Education. These standards articulate the floor of education to be provided to students, not the ceiling. And compliance with these standards ensures a basic level of service across the state. So the Division 22 standards include over 50 individual rules, which can be categorized in 4 large buckets: teaching and learning, health and safety, district performance and accountability, and human resources and staffing. A few examples of specific rules that fall into each of these categories. You will notice on these various documents that rules are now organized by categories instead of simply in order of rule number, which is how they've been organized in the past. Within teaching and learning and health and safety, there are several subcategories. ODE first introduced this new organizational structure a couple of years ago with a goal to increase understanding of what these standards are and what role they play in the state's delivery of educational services. You see there some of the areas within these particular buckets: teaching and learning, health and safety, and so forth. All right, so what happens if a district's out of compliance? ODE reviews the district's proposed corrective action plan and either approves or rejects it. If the plan's not approved, ODE contacts the district and provides technical assistance and support. Once the district has an approved plan, ODE may continue to provide technical support, and corrective action must be complete by the beginning of next school year. So we'll be reporting on a couple of standards that we're not in compliance with, and we'll be talking about that timeline by the end of this presentation. If the district fails to come back into compliance after an opportunity for corrective action, ODE may withhold a portion of the district's state school fund. Right, any questions before I move on? Let's see any. Okay. We make our report in the fall for the previous school year so we can report accurately. There are some rules that we can't say we're compliant with until the school year is over. For example, instructional time requirements. We may have planned our schedule so that we would be in compliance, but it's possible that weather or other circumstances could interfere with that, and we could end up not meeting minimal instructional minute requirements. At the same time, we're responsible for using this report as an opportunity to review requirements for the current school year and to ensure that we're meeting compliance requirements or that we have a plan for how to correct any deficiencies. So to provide some context for the report, I want to briefly review what was waived last year. The first is Section 3 of the Assessment of Essential Skills Rule. These are the assessment requirements for graduation. This was waived for graduates beginning in the 2020 school year. And the waiver still applies to the class of 2024. Section 2 of Essential Skills Rules, which is the local performance assessment requirement, still remains in effect, and districts must report on compliance with this section. Also, the requirement to submit data to PE collection was suspended last year for just 1 year. And this is a different rule than PE requirements rule, which requires a certain amount of instructional minutes for PE for grades K-8. This is focused on data collection. Centennial is in compliance on 96% of the Division 22 standards. We're not in compliance on 2 standards: human sexuality education and career education. And I want
Dr. Katsuda, Chair Selewski has a raised hand.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I had a question on the last page. That is essential skills graduation requirement. Is that what was recently in the news that they have extended further?
Yes. So at the present, it's a requirement. It's suspended to the 23-24 school year. And the report was mandated by Senate Bill 744. And the last State Board of Education meeting, ODE asked the board to extend the suspension of the assessment skills policy through the 27-28 school year. The state board will make a decision on this request in a future meeting. It kind of hit a wall there.
Thank
So-
you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I want to invite Director Callahan to speak to the corrective action for human sexuality, and then following that, Director Wright to outline corrective action on career education. Going to move forward a slide.
Thank you. Good evening, Board of Directors. So I'll go back and I'll just state, so one of the requirements is to have a board approved comprehensive sexuality education plan. This being my 3rd year in the district, I'll just give you my recent history. I spent 21-22 researching and searching to see if we had a comprehensive sexuality plan. I was unable to find any indicators of that. So that was 21-22. In the fall last year of 2022, I was here before you to let you know that we were not in compliance. And I had anticipated being able to build that plan in the year 22-23. I was not able to do that. However, we are close. We are very close. I will be bringing forward a draft plan for your viewing on November 8th. So we are in the process right now of working with our community partners. We have a draft that's just about done. It's close to 100%. However, we're also looking for we're going to post that on our website to collect inputs from our families, as well as reaching out to students to collect some input. And then again, we'll bring that forward on November 8th. And along with the board policy, which the last policy change for that was for Centennial was 2018. However, they made recent changes as of August 2022. So I'll also bring that forward in 2 weeks. So we didn't make the deadline, but we are darn close.
What I would add to that is that in a previous slide, Dr. Katsuda had referenced some of the consequences for being out of compliance. What I would offer is that along the way, Director Callahan has been in consultation with the Oregon Department of Education's point of contact for Division 22, so that she's receiving technical assistance from there proactively as opposed to submitting the plan and crossing fingers and hoping that they're okay with where we're at. So I don't know if there's an additional to speak to Director Callahan, but I wanted to point out that element.
Thank you. Yeah, that really represents the first bullet. I have been in conversation with them in October, informed them where we were in our process, and they gave me some guidance in terms of completion and a deadline on when that might be in terms of the extension plan. So we anticipate, I'm hopeful with your approval, that by the end of this 2023 year, so by December, we will have a district comprehensive sexuality education plan.
Thank you, Director Callahan. I would say the same is true for career education. I know Director Wright has been in continual contact with ODE, and she could probably share more about that in a second. So Director Wright, do you want to speak to career education?
Yes, and I appreciate seeing everyone this evening. And as those of you who participated in any element of our strategic planning process last year, being future ready and thinking about career and college opportunities came as such a high priority for students. And so in looking at this standard and thinking about all of the information that we collected from students and thinking about the priorities that they and their families shared, this is a place where we're having that conversation with ODE, because the requirement for career education is that each school district shall implement plans for career education for grades K through 12 as a part of the comprehensive school counseling program. So as a district, we have our comprehensive school counseling program, and we do have career education education as one of our goals. Something that for me is sitting in that place where I'm having conversations with ODE is thinking about the semantics of the K-12 programming for that. Our high schools and both of our middle schools over last year and this year have done a lot of work around those areas, and they're increasing the opportunities for students. And we're really wanting to make sure that there's alignment from elementary all the way through 12th grade and beyond to support that. And San is really crafting our plan so that we have something that's crafted and shared with everyone, and wanting to be really true to what the Division 22 standard is, as well as what our community is asking for. And so we're continuing to work with ODE around if we need to update plans and to determine if they're going to share with us if what we're doing right now counts as compliance or not. And we'll have that solidified before the November 15th deadline.
Thank you very much. Oh, I see Vice Chair Shields has a question.
So Denise, that it's underneath the counseling plan. So that just is a little confusing to me, I guess, because career education to me is meant, as you had mentioned, kind of more of a middle school, high school environment. So it's head scratching for me to think about how our counselors talk to second graders about career ed, and can that be embedded in the math curriculum or the social studies curriculum? What does it have to be a separate topic? Anyway, help me with that.
Yes, well, this is one of the pieces that I appreciate getting to work really collaboratively with Director Callahan, because we both have shared interests and overlap when it comes to both of these areas. And so part of why this falls underneath the comprehensive school counseling programs is because there's 4 components of that, and they're very interrelated. So it connects with very specific domains. So one is around academics, one's around career, one's around social emotional and community involvement. It does not mean that our school counselors are providing all of the instruction around that, but it's under the umbrella to ensure that systems are in place in the building and that there are ways that students are engaging in opportunities around that. So when we think about at the middle school and high school level, there is a lot that's happening around career education and development that's outside of the school counseling realm. And they're also connecting the dots between students and teachers and programs so that students are aware of opportunities and also supporting teacher awareness around opportunities that are there. So they're not 100% solely responsible for everything, but it does fall underneath their umbrella of their work to support. And it looks different, like you're saying. What it looks like for kindergarten is really around career awareness. And so the Oregon Department of Education has put together career connected learning, and they have a really cool graphic with 4 areas. So there's career awareness, there's career training, there's career there's 4 other places I'm not remembering right off the top of my head, but we have it staged out so that really elementary is around awareness. Awareness also travels across the grades in different levels, but once we get to the upper grades, it's really more around preparation and training, which we wouldn't necessarily be doing that with our elementary students.
I think I saw Chair Solowski's hand, but it went down.
My question was answered before I even had the opportunity to ask it. Great job.
All right, Director Lynn.
Yeah, is there any kind of more description we can have on the career education part of like how we are out of compliance, in what specific part and why?
The piece right now is that when we look at the K-12 trajectory for our elementary students, there are not specific steps and actions that we're taking right now that is consistent across all of our elementary schools. Our middle school and high school have more opportunities because of our Measure 98 dollars and some of the opportunities that secondary students have that are different than elementary students. And so that's the piece that while we have a goal in our comprehensive school counseling program, the specific lessons, what opportunities, and what that specific awareness looks like for students is not completely planned out. So similar to Director Callahan talking about, we have some draft plans. We also need to bring some of our elementary staff together, counselors and others, to really draft out what are some of those opportunities that our elementary students could be provided with an experience that would then build on our K-12 experiences.
All right. I don't see any more hands. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone. I think we're good.
Director Lynn, was that response sufficient?
So at those elementary schools, was that because of staff turnover? I'm still kind of like wondering, why weren't we there already? Kind of,
It is not due to staff turnover. When we look at our elementary school days, there's a lot that we pack into that's focusing on essential pieces. So when we think about our language arts curriculum, our math curriculum, when we think about science, when we think about social studies, there are many things that happen within those days at elementary level. And so we've had 2 new adoptions, and trying to think about where do we also add in career education. We're trying to be really mindful of those experiences, and have to really work with classroom teachers, our building administrators, and our counselors to ensure that it's a meaningful experience and it's enhancing opportunities for students and not taking away from other experiences. So we do have some more work to do around that. And Director Callahan or Dr. Casuto, you might have additional pieces to add to that as well.
Thank you, Director Wright. I think I would only agree when you think about the elementary school day, it's always a challenge, and we are trying to be really thoughtful to integrate these the content areas, and that takes time and thoughtfulness. And given that we do have 2 new core curriculums, it takes a year or 2 to become familiar with that before we can really dive into and look for other areas of integration, such as social studies or career ed. And so that is work that's always going on while they're also attending to the standards. So.
Great, thank you.
Vice Chair Shields, I see your hand.
This is a broader statement, and it isn't related necessarily just to these 2 standards, but we just got through recommendations, right, in our previous. And one of the recommendations, number 9, mastery of a small number of critical academic standards. But we got to satisfy all of these standards that are in, Division 22. And if we can't take the time to talk about this, or we need time to discuss this, how are our staff understanding Division 22 and how it relates to what we want to accomplish with our equity, and where priorities might, this is our, maybe recommendation 9 is our new priority, and yet how does that impact Division 22? I guess I'm asking is, you as our district office specialists, how can you communicate this juggling between what we want for our students versus what the state says we must do? And I hope that made some kind of sense to you guys as I was trying to articulate it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my response to that would be, I think practitioners hold a lot in terms of instructional standards, content standards, etc. And it doesn't mean that they're may not be aware of it, but we don't, and to my understanding, we don't elevate Division 22 as a priority for staff to know about. We at the district level, I think, what's the word for it, would be kind of like brokering or attending to that on behalf of the district. Their job is really focused on classroom students, et cetera. And our job is to make sure that we're adhering to these district level standards. So we attend to that, knowing what that should look like in schools. And we monitor that on our end. I'm not aware of this moment unless principals decide to go into detail in Division 22 where we are explaining it in detail to staff. I'd rather they focus on the classroom, and then we would take care of this element of district oversight in terms of meeting these standards. So correct me or add to that, please.
Absolutely. And I would, couple things. One, I know last spring, for example, I went through some key Division 22 standards with our building administrators, because we needed information from them. We want to make sure things that were compliance pieces were being tended to. I will say these two standards in particular are relevant to our strategic plan. And you'll hear more from around the human sexuality education, but that is very much intended to provide information, medically accurate information to our students so that they can be making informed decisions for themselves as they come of age. So that's very much in line with wanting to empower our students to feel included, to belong, to feel good about who they are. So that I see as aligned, like the career education, career education that, there's a lot we can do and we ought to be doing, and looking at that in the midst of our strategic plan and while staying in compliance. So some of these it's embedded. I guess that's my point. And I would be remiss not to say for the elementary educator is where the pressure point is. When you think about an elementary educator having to hold the water for every content area in a 6-hour day, that is a challenge. And so I just, just to surface that, our secondary folks, because they are our specialists, it may impact them, but not nearly like the elementary teacher who is really needing to be responsible for all of them.
I would just add, not that I necessarily need to, because I think the answers provided so far have been sufficient, but I would just acknowledge and validate what I believe to be the concern that you're expressing, Vice Chair Shields, because these two should have established routines in terms of how they're instructed, and for whatever reason they're not. And with the elementary educator, as Director Callahan pointed out, they're already responsible for so much. And to get these two rockets into orbit, so to speak, it's going to take fuel to get that done. And so that's some tension that I feel as superintendent, and we've talked about on our cabinet, is, when we talk about getting these plans into compliance, it requires representation of educators and administrators, which then pulls them off from the other elements that we're doing in terms of getting our strategic plan in place. And so it fractures the attention of our educators to be attending to so many different elements. And these are practices that need to get established into our regular routine and are important, particularly to our graduate profile that we've established around student agency and so forth. And so we need to get these in place, and there's tension points in doing so.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Harden.
The thought about, troubleshooting that, at the elementary school, it's like, what if we had one of the staff members teach all the grades, or one of the faculty members be the expert at each location and teach that portion of the day, kind of like PE, we do that, library, we have music, it's that way. Maybe that is a possible outcome. Just throwing out ideas that I'm thinking as the challenges are being presented.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I also have, in my own experience with the human sexuality education that my kids received at this Centennial elementary schools, was very dependent on their teachers' comfortability with the subject. And their teacher didn't even teach the subject, they sent them to another classroom. So I know that's kind of already happening. And I feel very strongly, especially with the human sexuality education, that it's important that all kids receive this information, regardless of how their teacher feels about it. And so I want all of our educators to hopefully be at the same page with how important this is. Director Andrews?
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Chair Stolowski. I know that the Multnomah Health Department has people who teach these things, as does the Planned Parenthood organization, both in Multnomah County. So have you thought about bringing, Director Callahan, you talked about working with community partners. Perhaps if the elementary program is failing, have you thought about engaging one of the community partners who are comfortable teaching human sexuality and reproductive health to come in and do it, so that we don't have the types of outcomes that Chair Slowski's talking about? That's very dependent on the comfort level of elementary school teachers.
Director Andrews, I think that's a great question / suggestion. Yes, we've got great partnerships with the Multnomah County Health Department with our secondary health classes. And they've been side by side with us in the creation of the comprehensive sexuality education plan. It is a little bit challenging when you think about every elementary teacher in each K-5. The content is such that it really is a K-5 standards that need to be addressed. And so that's my challenge. How do I reach all of the elementary teachers? And there is really something to be said for teachers who have the relationship with kids to be able to hold that space with them with content areas such as this. It could be awkward for folks. So there's work to be done, and I am open to figure this out, because I share the priority with that's been shared here. We'll get there.
All right, so I have a couple more points to share with this larger group here. Let's see here. Hopefully everyone can still see that. We'll open it up for questions again in the end. But I wanted to address, hold on just a second. What's going on here? I wanted to address some of the standards and compliance for this coming school year. So you're looking ahead. This year, reporting on PE requirements for the middle grades is a bit different than other rules due to a passage of a House Bill 3199 in June. That bill revised statute to include 2 significant changes to physical education instructional minutes in grades 6 through 8. First, the weekly time requirement was reduced from 225 minutes to 115 minutes. Second, the new weekly minimum of 150 minutes is calculated as an average over the duration of the school year. That provision went into effect in July, and as a result, some districts that were out of compliance with the old requirements in 22-23 are now in compliance. And the compliance status choices for this rule have been adjusted so that districts can accurately report their status for the previous year as well as the current school year. This revised health service rule will be in effect for this school year. Districts will first report on their compliance with the revised rule as part of the annual assurances in November of 2024. All right. These changes have been considered as of the September 21st State Board meeting. assessment of essential skills graduation requirement, extended the suspension through 2027-28 school year. They delayed that vote, as I had shared earlier. And then also the Menstrual Dignity Act. The board voted to adopt the new OAR that will link requirements of the Menstrual Dignity Act for students through Division 22. The new rule responds to feedback by strengthening the school district's accountability and providing communities an avenue to voice concerns. It doesn't change the requirements of the intention of the original Menstrual Dignity Act, but it will enhance the Oregon Department of Education's ability to provide technical support to schools and districts to provide menstrual product options that are free and privately accessible. So, are there any questions on those? No? All right. Any questions overall? Division 22. No? All right. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I delayed response really fast. I do have one question, and that's, do you guys ever like talk shop with other districts about how they're achieving some of these things? Yeah.
I do know that Oregon Department of Education has recently provided the option and opportunity for districts to collaborate with each other, particularly on rules that have been challenging to be in compliance with. I do remember back in the day when I was curriculum director, there was a lot of hubbub around PE minutes and the fact that we just didn't have enough minutes in the day to be in compliance with PE minute requirements. And they actually brought districts together to problem solve and realized it was a lot more complex than they originally thought. So as far as these particular ones that we're out of compliance with, I haven't heard of any, but it doesn't mean there isn't the opportunity that ODE is providing, but I haven't received any information on any such kind of service this year on those. But maybe Denise and Mo have, I'm not sure.
We will informally in our county meetings
Mhm.
discuss things as it surfaces for districts.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. That was full of information. Next up on the agenda, it's me, superintendent evaluation process. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did last year's process for the superintendent evaluation, and some suggestions for what we could do differently next year. And I'd really love to get input from folks here. So last year's process, we followed the OSBA and COSA guidelines, and really had a robust overview of all of the things that we are tracking. And I believe that went pretty well. I'd like it to run the same. But the one thing that I think was really missing was feedback from stakeholders. And so be that the people here on the cabinet, be that school principals, right? So what I would like to do is open kind of a discussion at this point to see what other board members, cabinet members, school principals that are here think how we would like to incorporate them into the stakeholder process as we do superintendent evaluation. And are there other groups or people that we think should be incorporated? Yes. And so, don't everybody speak at once, but I'd love to hear where everybody's at. Director Lynn, thank you.
I'll jump right in there. It sounds like a great idea. I think it's always good to get as much feedback as we can, particularly however we can get it from people who will give us information that we can work with. You know, just not kind of your general run of the mill, hey, everybody's great, everything's going great, but possibly something where we can help Superintendent Owens become a better superintendent. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Director Andrews, please.
I agree, it's a great idea. I'm thinking just sort of real process. I do agree with Director Lynn that the idea is that we get, you know, positive feedback to help Superintendent Owens figure out, you know, where to really focus attention. I'm wondering if we start small. With feedback from others. I'm just not sure how the whole gathering the data and, you know, is it going to mean that we're going to have to dedicate a board member to try to compile data? Are we going to rely on Missy to do it, who actually has a job? Anyway, that just kind of comes to my mind. I think it's good. I guess I just recommend we start sort of small, maybe with just cabinet members. If we decide to expand to principals, okay, but maybe it's a second iteration that we go to community members or parents or something like that. Maybe we don't do that yet. Maybe Chief Rosales Correa could help us fashion something that would be the beginning of of a process like this.
Yeah, and I anticipate doing a lot of the legwork too, because I think that this is super important. Next up, I see Director Harden. Thank you, Director Andrews.
Thanks. Along those lines, I think it's a great idea. I think we should gather information from other stakeholders. You know, hearing Claudia saying start small, you know, that might be a wise decision. I think it would be more useful if there was maybe, you know, kind of a interview process. Like maybe we come up with questions to ask these stakeholders versus sending out a survey of 1 through 5 scale, send it back to us by this deadline. Because you know, I kind of really want to know how people are feeling, and you know, actually have a conversation about it versus a stale survey on a Tuesday afternoon.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Vice Chair Shields. You're moving
along those lines. We've done a lot of different ways of gathering data for superintendent evaluation over the years. And with Director Andrews and Director Harden combination, yes, small to start out. And yes, interviewing is good, but interviewing can't be done. We did that once without really good outlines. And so we came back with different information as board members. And not that that's bad, but if we're trying to hone in on something in specific, right, to help, then it would be nice to have, you know, specific questions to talk about if we're interviewing. I pulled up the OSBA. They have a targeted feedback survey. It's in, we did a lot of our work on this last year based on OSBA's handbook. The thing that's nice about this is that you work with somebody to create those questions. It's not just, you know, as you were mentioning, Director Harden, it's just not, you know, a survey, but you come up with the types of questions that you think would be appropriate. And then we as board would decide how to implement it. Is that a survey that's given out earlier and then you interview about it to get that type of feedback? Very similar to what we've done, right? We have questions that we answer about our superintendent, and yet we come together and have a discussion, because we also realize that the way I was perceiving a question and the way I was perceiving an answer might be different than somebody else's perception. I thought that was a very valuable process as well. And if we were going to be able to garner additional information from a group of administrators, starting with the cabinet, sounds reasonable to me. I certainly would support that. And then, of course, talking with our superintendent about the type of information that he would also like to glean from that survey process. It can't be just us figuring it out. I think Superintendent Owens has some ideas of what he would like to see in terms of feedback and questions. So anyway, 2 cents.
Thank you. I'd love if any of the cabinet members feel that this is something that they would feel of value, they would like to participate in. Go ahead, Dr. Katsuda.
I'm not responding to your question.
That's fine.
Mostly providing perspective that if an evaluation is not predicated on the actual job of the superintendent, which is really complex, and I would say that most of our public may not have a complete or accurate idea of what a superintendent does, just like most people really don't have an accurate or complete idea of what a principal does, right? It's very complex that we'd have to really be clear on that and the work plan and so forth. And so I guess I was putting it out there and wondering what the thoughts were of the board in terms of how to set that before you start even begin gathering information, so you know what kind of questions to ask and they're actually based on the job.
Yeah, so there, the OSBA thing that Pam or that Vice Chair Shields was talking about, I don't have it in front of me, but they have like, it's very much based in the 7 different aspects of what the superintendent's role is. And it's not just OSBA, it's like OSBA and COSA. So the superintendents, they've come together to really identify, what are the important elements of the job. And so what we did last year was just really take that as a board and evaluate Superintendent Owens in our opinions on those 7 topics. My thoughts would be taking those 7 topics I think that, yes, we would definitely have to figure out something if we were going to take it to the public. But I think that, you know, I was hoping that with a small step of first maybe the cabinet, right? I would just love more information. I think that what was my experience in pulling together all of the feedback from the board was that there were areas that I feel that we didn't have a ton of context in, that I feel that those of you who are those that he directly supervises might have a little bit more context for us to be able to give a fully realized review for him. And that James or Superintendent Owens, I don't know if you have anything to say either.
I don't. I'm really just interested in deferential to the board in how you would like to have this handled. I'm completely open-minded to the feedback that you might like to receive and the places in which you might like to receive it from. So continue discussing, and I'll, you know, if I have thoughts at the end, I'll weigh in.
Vice Chair Shields, please.
I think it's important that Dr. Katsuda, you know, what you brought up, because of being through several of these over the years, if it isn't grounded in what the job description is, then it just gets all over the place. And we made that mistake in an evaluation with Dr. Coakley when we went out to the public and just, you know, talked to not random people. These are people that Dr. Coakley had been dealing with, but we didn't have enough, you know, parameters to get really, we just got some anecdotal information, and I don't know that that was all that valuable, and it took a lot of board time, and yet it didn't have, I don't think it moved the needle in any way. And right now we are internally focused with our strategic planning, our equity work. You know, everybody's delving in deeply into what their practices are. And Superintendent Owens is directing all of that. And watching for the time that it takes to do that, and still meet standard and Division 22 standards. I mean, it's right. And so people have to understand, and I don't know that anybody outside of our cabinet and maybe our principals would understand all of those kind of things. So starting with the cabinet makes perfect sense to me, but I would definitely want to maybe take advantage of what OSBA, COSA, that framework that they've sort of put in their handbook, give us more details so that you, as the chair, could come back to us and say, hey, this is what targeted feedback looks like. This is the kind of thing that we would need to do, and asking one of us as board members to, to spend a little extra time with you doing that work, I think is appropriate, because, that's a lot. You already do a lot for in your position. So it would be nice to have other board members, step up and you delegate, maybe. What do they call it? Voluntold.
Oh, voluntold.
One. That's that. I love that. Voluntold. You might have to do that with some of us.
I appreciate that, Vice Chair Shields. And so that said, I'd love if anybody else has anything that they'd like to share. I think that it's clear that we would like a little bit more information as a board. And so I can spend a little time looking at the targeted feedback survey. And we can figure something out in an upcoming work session where we can present it I'll present it with some recommendations. Maybe I also have a lot of experience in my professional world with qualitative evaluation, and so like doing interviews and finding themes and different things like that, and I love that too. So if anybody does want to help, fantastic, but that sparks joy in me too. So excellent. If there's nothing else on the topic, we will revisit it at an appropriate time. Let's see. The superintendent report. Look what time it is.
All right. I know you all have been hanging in, so we'll try to be efficient with our time. I would say I have a medium-sized report today, so I'm trying to be cognizant of the load that you've had so far with the reports. So greetings, board members. It's my pleasure and privilege to share with you this update about happenings in our school district. I will start by saying October is National Principals Month, in which we have the opportunity to honor principals in Centennial School District for their significant impact on the growth, success, and well-being of our district students. Centennial is thrilled to have such a hardworking team of principals across our district. They wear many hats and regularly work extended hours for our students, staff, and families. They are visionary leaders and agents of student success. Please join me in recognizing each of our principals in the Centennial School District from left to right, top to bottom. In the picture you will see displayed here, Denise Wright, who doubles as our principal of the Centennial Transition Center. Holland Robbie, who is our new principal of Pleasant Valley Elementary. Dr. Zachary Ramberg, who is the principal of Centennial Virtual Academy. We have on the bottom left, Lisa Klingen, who is principal of Meadows Elementary. Jeb Hubbs, principal of Oliver Middle School. Jared Austin, principal of Powell Butte Elementary. Laura June, who you'll remember from Pleasant Valley, she is currently interim principal at Park Lane Elementary School. Marin Miller, who's here on the screen with us, is principal of Centennial High School. Gail Imran Sedaris is principal of Butler Creek. Leslie Van Cleek is principal of Patrick Lynch. And last but not least, we have Nathan Buck, who is the principal of Centennial Middle School. I'm truly proud to know each of them and to have them as part of our leadership team. They are dedicated, caring, and passionate. Last Tuesday, October 17th, Centennial conducted its first ever data summit. As was mentioned during the last superintendent's report, this new routine, which is part of Roadmap 27, will be conducted each trimester to monitor the impact of our learning and to adjust and improve practices and systems. During the data summit, you'll see pictures from it here on the screen. There were about 90 representative staff from school leadership teams engaged in a structured reflective process that involved the review and analysis of student data and professional practices aligned to their school improvement goals and also Roadmap 27. Teams identified strengths as well as areas of need, and they developed an action plan with the intent to review the impact of that plan during the next data summit, which will be held in February. That will include the engagement of their respective staff in a similar process at school sites in the coming weeks, so that they're engaging their broader staff in reflective exercises as well. On Friday, October 13th, so just recently, all kindergarten through 8th grade schools participated in day 2 of 4 of responsive classroom training for the 23-24 school year. Responsive classroom is a student-centered social and emotional learning approach to teaching in school discipline. It is a set of research and evidence-based practices designed to create safe, joyful, and engaging classroom and school communities for both students and teachers. Responsive classroom sessions are coordinated by Director of Student Services Denise Wright, who you just saw on the last screen as principal of CTC, and led by trainers from Responsive Classroom organization. They utilize a collaborative learning approach for our staff. The responsive classroom approach focuses on creating optimal learning conditions for students to develop their academic, social, and emotional skills needed for success in and out of school, and providing positive school and classroom communities where students learn, behave, hope, and set achieve goals. Practices that staff are learning through responsive classroom include morning meetings in grades K through 5, or advisory in grades 6 through 8, interactive modeling, structured learning activities, classroom and school expectations, and student and teacher talk. So it's wide ranging. Responsive classroom training is a great professional development tool for both new and seasoned teachers alike, and they can greatly benefit and apply in their classrooms. As I said, this was day 2 of 4. Days 3 and 4 of the training are scheduled for November 8th and November 9th. Yesterday afternoon, I attended the quarterly Center for Advanced Learning, or CAL, board meeting. You'll see pictures of various learning opportunities that are available at CAL. CAL is a regional career and technical education charter school. It serves just under 100 Centennial juniors and seniors. Centennial is one of 3 CAL partner districts, and as the superintendent in Centennial, I serve as the member of the CAL governing board. CAL Director Jessica Gallagher, led the board through her goals for the year. She provided enrollment and financial data, similar to what we see here in our board meetings, and initial work done in collaboration with the district partners around areas of opportunities with respect to programmatic overlap between home high schools and the offerings that are available at CAL. I know that was an interest with our board in the past year, and something that I have expressed to CAL leadership, and they're acting on. We also discussed some logistical issues with respect to continued development of the land around the Gresham Station. If you're familiar with that area, there's a lot of development going on, and potentially in the future with the Kmart that's vacant there and so forth. And how this will soon impact the availability of student parking going forward, which is a small thing, but a big thing, depending on how you look at it. So topic for another day. Overall, I'm impressed with the stewardship of the CAL program under Director Gallagher's leadership, and look forward to sharing the work of the school with you directly, should the board be interested in a report somewhere down the line. Last night, I had the pleasure of attending the Centennial High School boys soccer home game. With spirited play and strong teamwork, the CHS boys prevailed versus Rex Putnam by a score of 6-0, or 6-0, I think is maybe how they say that in soccer. It was senior night, so it was a pleasure to see the senior players recognized by their teammates, their coaches, and their families. At halftime, there was a tribute to longtime CHS soccer coach Gordon Mauser, who passed away recently at the age of 83. Mr. Mauser was one of the early pioneers of high school soccer coaching in Oregon, where his coaching record at CHS was 275, 71, and 45. So just based on those numbers, you can tell that he was there for a long time, winning the 1983 OSAA State Championship and the 1994 Oregon Boys Coach of the Year Award. Funds are being raised in memory of Coach Mauser. $5,600 of an intended goal of $6,000 have already been generated, with the dollars supporting a Memorial Boys Soccer Scholarship for a graduating athlete at Centennial High School. On the slide that you can see here, you can see a couple of pictures, including Coach Mauser's family, Centennial alumni, including myself, and another photo, which also includes current CHS boys soccer players, and then a picture that I took, which Edwin would put me to shame if he was taking the picture, but that was my cell phone camera picture from the game that you can see there. Finally, next week, Director Southerton, Dr. Katsuda, and I are scheduled to meet with representatives from the newly formed Centennial District Arts Foundation. The foundation was formed as an outgrowth of the Awesome Eagle Show Band reunion, which was convened for the Rose Festival Grand Floral Parade last year. Our meeting will include Centennial alumni Terry Smith, who was a lead coordinator for the show band reunion, and Shar Giard, as many of you will remember, as the co-chair for the Yes for Centennial Kids, which ran the 2020 bond campaign, as well as being the former Centennial board chair. At our meeting, we plan to learn about the work of the foundation and what they've done to date, and explore ways that we can partner with one another to enhance the learning experiences for students. Chief Rosales Correa and CHS Principal Maren Miller have been attending foundation meetings, and I believe that Directors Hardin, Stanley, and Vice Chair Shields may be attending as well. And to that end, I'll invite any board members to share their experiences to date with the foundation meetings, should they so choose. But before you do that, let me just close quickly. And with that, I invite any questions and comments you might have, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Wait a minute, you didn't let me point out me in that picture.
I'm going to, but I just wanted to say that so that I could turn
the one picture that they keep showing of Centennial, that one that the overhead.
Yeah, I just wanted to turn the thing off so that you can see each other and not the PowerPoint.
That's like way back in the day, and I'm in back with the color guard.
I'll cue it up so that you can see it. Hold on.
Yeah, and Rod's in front with the letter team. So we go way back. I have had a conversation with Terry Smith. They're excited about supporting the district and really would like board involvement in any way that we would like to be involved. So, feel free to reach out. They have this short-term kind of goals, and then they have some long-term thinking about what else can we do. They're very excited, and so you want to capture that excitement. And I'm hopeful that we're in a position where we can really support them in their support of us and our arts program. They're mostly former band people, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily their only focus. That's where they started. That doesn't mean that's where they want to end. They do see it as a comprehensive arts approach, which is important for us to note as well, because we know that arts can move our students in a different way than just our curriculum does. So I'm hopeful that we continue to just really support them in what they want to see done.
Thank you. That's great. I definitely think that arts offer a place for belonging for students who don't traditionally feel belonging in like a classroom setting. And so I love the Centennial Arts Foundation and whatever we can do to support them as well is awesome. Thank you for your report, Superintendent Owens. I did get to go to senior night for the women's volleyball team. And as I see Principal Miller on here, I just want to say, man, they have taken and run with that fight song. It is so exciting to see the spirit that comes out of the high school students when that fight song starts, and they're all on the floor screaming at the time. I mean, I'm impressed with what you've done to garner school spirit at your school these days. It's just really refreshing to see. Thank you.
I wanted to offer a couple more things. Number one, Director Harden, I don't know if you've attended any meetings and wanted to share anything about your experience at all. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I didn't want to forget that piece.
No, I have not attended the meetings. I have talked with Sharjyard about it, you know, and I love that it taps into the alumni. I think that that is something mixing our current students with our alums is something that is a positive direction for our community and for our school and for our students. So I love seeing that and hope to see more.
The other thing I wanted to say, and it wasn't a part of my prepared comments, but I just wanted to acknowledge, and I'm going to resist naming names because when you do that, then you forget people and then it's not fair. But the amount of people that it takes to put these events together is impressive. And last night it was super cold and rainy out, and we had people that were doing security, people that were organizing the event, people that were commentating and providing the narration for the event, administrators who were there supervising, people who are manning the gates. So there's just a lot of staff involvement to make these events function for kids to be able to have these experiences. And so I just wanted to recognize that, because to me, that is something that can be forgotten. And as I saw all of these individuals who I know have already worked a full day and then are dedicating their time to be doing this as well, I just thought that was worthy of acknowledgement.
Absolutely agreed. I think that every time I go to one of the events and I'm like, you're still here when I see folks. And also shout out to the booster clubs, running the snack shacks and stuff like that. I had the opportunity to work in one of the snack shacks recently, and that was super fun. I encourage y'all, if you're looking for a fun way, I got to hang out with the Key Club. It was super cool. All right, so let's see here. We're moving on from reports. We've got confirmation items.
Oh,
yes.
Chair, I want a motion to approve, but I had a question and I did not say at the beginning at the agenda that I did have a couple of questions about the field trip. I don't know if you want to pull it and have questions, or if you want us to ask you or ask them while we're considering them.
Oh, hold on just one second. Director Lynn, did you have something to add before we moved on to the confirmation items?
Not on the potential motion or the confirmation items themselves. I was just asking, what's the CHS Leadership Club?
Is that student council?
Yeah, if it's relation to the field trip, it's our ASB, it's our student council.
Okay, thank you.
I think let's go ahead and pull them on both, pull the field trips and we can have a conversation on those after we have a motion to pass the rest of the confirmation items.
So I move to approve confirmation items as presented, with the exception of the 2 field trip requests to be discussed in action items by the board.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, the confirmation items have passed, and we will get to the student travel items now.
The only question I had was on the 2 things. One, the financial goals for both of these field trips are daunting. So what happens, and Principal Miller, I'm kind of looking at you because you have to oversee these. In either field trip, what happens if a student can't make the financial goals? That's one of the questions. And the second question is about the CHS leadership in particular. Totally support this. These are not questions to minimize the importance, but it's such a short time frame to pull this one for the leadership together. Again, it relates to how each student can raise the amount of money necessary as an individual. So that's my concern that I'd like to just hear some additional information about.
Yeah, let me tackle those questions in order, and then I actually have a question for the board that I would like some feedback on. Because as you know, it's been about 5 years pre-COVID since we have traveled out of state in this sort of fashion. However, the experiences that students can have, the growth, this is what it means to be college and career ready. This is giving them the experiences. So we want them to have those experiences. But I have a question I'll ask the board. I'd love some feedback on. First question is equity is super important, as you know. So each of these field trips already have built into them where different parents have already volunteered to give donations or scholarships or grants, however we structure it for students that cannot afford the fees, because they are substantial, particularly with the soccer. The soccer, and this is part of the field trip policy, they have an extra $12,000 in their actual ASB account that they could pull from to give scholarships for students that can't afford it. And then I have another additional, a principal fund, it's a CSF fund where I could also pull money. However, we also have parents that have already volunteered and said, we want to make sure everybody goes. We're willing to, just let us know anonymously, we'll donate it. And that's what's super cool. I mean, you already have the community. Particularly, and I don't want to give any details, but we already know of some students in both field trips that will need support. They've already asked, and we've already lined up that support. And so a lot of that happens through me. And then we have anonymous ways that they could ask, because again, there's no shame, there's nothing. We just want you to be able to go. On the flip side, so that goes for the first field trip. Second one, very similar. They already have parents and they have additional ASB funds. And I also have an ASB fund where I can donate scholarships is what we usually call it. And then we have different systems where I'll either meet with the student or the person organizing will just meet with the student. Both field trips are planning to actually try to fundraise extra money through SNAP funding. And then that money would automatically go to the students as well. However, this is also to be just very clear, and I can show you the budget lines. There is a little bit of transition here because a lot's going to depend on when they actually book all the different costs and get the final costs in here. So all of this is just estimates. So that answers both where the extra money to make sure everybody could go from. And this is my question to the board. It has been literally 5 years. I've actually contacted many of the high schools around us. Trying to get past knowledge. This is a push-pull. I mean, it depends on what high school and what board you talk to. What's the threshold for how much a student should fundraise or should we expect for an experience like this versus how much do we just, try to provide? Again, the non-negotiable, I guess, for me as principal, I'll be honest, is I want everybody to go. But so let me push it back. I would love to hear your thoughts because it actually helps me as I'm working through each of these decisions as my decision points. So I'll actually put it back to you.
Thank you, Principal Miller. Does anybody want to field that from the board? I'm happy to jump in. I mean, yeah, I think that ultimately I want as many people to get the experience as possible. Being that I am a little closer to the baseball trip, I have talked to folks at other schools to see what they're doing because there are both Sandy and Barlow are also planning to go to Arizona at the same time. And I know that Sandy was at 1,000 and I can't remember. I feel like Barlow was trying to keep it at 750, but they may have to push it. And honestly, I think that's probably where my threshold would be, like that, like 500, 750. I mean, it would be really hard, like to without a lot of future planning and fundraising as a parent to feel like, ooh, I've got to come up with $1,000 right now. And the way that things cost, we can't expect the school district to foot this bill completely, right? And so I think that, yeah, my gut would be like somewhere between that, around 750 might be a sweet spot, like some 500 to 1,000, but like 750 might be a sweet spot. Other thoughts? Vice Chair Shields, I see you've come off mute.
I've been tasked to look at all of the travel policies, and I've asked Missy to help me with that with OSBA, which, by the way, is no help. Only in the sense that their stuff is old. Our stuff is old, but we're not out of compliance with OSBA. They haven't done anything with it, and so it gives us an opportunity, I think, to really look at this. And I know as board members, we move through our superintendent in terms of how we impact others. But Superintendent Owens, if I could work with Principal Miller, if that's appropriate, to start gleaning some of this information from other districts and past practices, and the fact that our chair is. We have had board members who have been really connected to our athletic programs. And that insight is critical to understanding kind of that inner feeling in working, because you're living it with your students, and I'm only living it from past experiences. So the more that we can kind of work together and look at those, we have the opportunity. I mean, we've said we want to take the opportunity to do the policy, but where we're going to really have the impact so that we understand together as board members to discuss it will be in the administrative reg, where we can give that kind of guidance. And I would love to sit down with several people. I just didn't realize how daunting it was until Missy and I were talking about it and went, oh my gosh, what did I volunteer for? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and I didn't understand it really as such. I love what Chair Selesky has said in terms of having a threshold, but I don't understand how the current monies, like you were just describing, which was so helpful, that there are places. And yet, what could we do to help our students even raise money, knowing that some things are going to come up and they will have a bucket to go to? And maybe they do, but the pandemic has, given we've got a lag, right? Because our students weren't able to travel. And so these students that you're working with in leadership right now don't really have a clue, because they hadn't been able to come up in the last few years in leadership to know these things. So we can work on this. I mean, yes, definitely approve these travel trips, right? There's no question in my mind about it, but let's take some time to really review what our policy is and the AR is, to reflect really what is current and what our expectations should be for our students. And with that lens of equity that we continue to say, that's the important piece. So again, Superintendent Owens, I'm asking for permission if Principal Miller is willing in his busy time to start working on this, so that we have drafts that we can bring back to the board and to have further discussion. So we won't be continually asking these questions of our principal, who primarily does this, but the field trip policy covers, K through 12. It's not just our high school, but maybe there's a segment that we have to have that is specific to our high school. And I'm telling you, after I've been doing the analysis, it's a little jumbled and a little bit difficult to follow. So I would like to do that linear thinking. I would like to see that be clearer in our policy and our administrative reg.
I imagine that Principal Miller would be happy to help with that effort.
Yeah, I would definitely like it. I would love to explore this more with you, and especially how do we integrate our new equity lens into this form, into this practice, knowing that exclusion is something that we just cannot, at least I'll speak for myself, can't tolerate. So.
Thank you. Director Harden and then Director Andrews.
Yeah, I think it's something that, we need to look at come around budget season too. We have a fund that we use for classroom maintenance now. So maybe we have a fund that we use specifically for field trips. I mean, at the elementary level, a lot like these classes go to the pumpkin patch every year. So we know that the bus is going to cost this much. Like there's some field trips that we know are going to be upcoming, and we have a general idea of the cost of those. So maybe have those included and as a separate account for the budget in the upcoming year. That doesn't help us for this year. And absolutely, I don't want us, our students, to miss out on these opportunities because the adults can't find the money for it and we can't figure it out. That's really the bottom line for me, is like, don't let them miss out on this opportunity, especially if they're fundraising for it and other people want to help. If there's other groups and, community partners or parents that want to ensure that the whole group goes, then that's fantastic. And we shouldn't cause any stumbling blocks or the ability for that to happen. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Andrews.
So my question's just out of ignorance. It's along the lines of equity. This is the first 2 field trips we've approved on that require airline flights. How do kids who are undocumented get through TSA?
That is a question I'll need to research and get back to you.
Great question, Director Andrews. Director Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 quick questions on the baseball one. Is this a voluntary one, or is this something they won into? And the 12,000 for Airbnb, that seems a lot. And particularly Airbnb, was there not a cheaper alternative?
Again, this is a estimate, and what they're doing is they're renting a house down there, and I can look at it myself. What was the first part of your question?
Is this a voluntary tournament, or did they win their way into this, or something they've?
This is voluntary. You could think of it as sort of like preseason, going down and experiencing it. Rose, do you want to add anything to that, especially as your parent perspective?
Yeah, it's voluntary. It's something that they, I think that the team has kind of talked about for several years, wanting to get to go down, do some of these tournaments in Arizona, maybe catch a preseason game and team building, stuff like that, the varsity team.
Okay, and then in response to your earlier question, Principal Miller, I don't see it as the same in terms of it's a voluntary versus something, you're kind of earning into. And I don't see it at the same level as an academic activity. And so if we can concentrate our resources more on those things, academic, and of course, if a team is winning into something, maybe there, but seems like a lot of money to just be draining into the bank, into an Airbnb account, when we talk about so many other areas where we don't have money for.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Lynn. Anything else on this topic?
May I make a motion to approve the 2 field trips as presented?
You may.
So I do move.
So moved.
That we approve the 2 field trips as presented. And I need a second, I guess.
Jess seconded. Director Harden seconded. Great. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Everybody voted? Yeah, aye. Ayes have it. Great. And I look forward to seeing what comes of your work, Director Shields, with Principal Miller, and please let me know where I can assist in that process as well. All right. Well, let's talk about some future agenda items. Superintendent Owens, do you have anything for the good of the order?
I've got future agenda items as usual.
Awesome.
So we are going to be initiating our school reports. We will be starting with Centennial High School. We will have Principal Marin Miller back, and he will be breaking the ice with us reinstating that process. As was mentioned during the Division 22 report, we have the comprehensive sexuality education plan. It'll be a report and a proposed action for the board. We have our standard slate of reports. We also are projected to have our OSBA elections for the state board, the Legislative Policy Committee, and there are 2 resolutions associated with that as well. We let Director Southerton take a breather on the bench this evening, but he will be back in the game for possible interview of budget committee candidates. And then also the awarded the GMGC for the Oliver Seismic is what we're projected to have him for. And then we also have a few policy first reads. And that's it.
Vice Chair Shields.
Just not a future agenda item, but an appreciation for an opportunity that our dining services gave us with our little green sheets. We were able, Director Andrews and I took our little coupons and met with Principal Miller and came to the high school. And boy, did we get an education about all manner of things. And the food was delicious. So thumbs up the dining services. It was fun to see the kids. We interacted. Principal Miller put some of those kids on the spot for us, which was great. They're very, very good and articulate about, you know, what their passions are or their opinions are. So that was very helpful. We were also there during the time that the manufacturing was being highlighted as a career area in the hallway. So that was a fun thing to see. Couldn't quite figure out why people were carrying windows into the high school until we saw what was going on. We got to be at the very end of a pep rally thing. So watching all the students stream out towards us, that was an experience. So it was, we just did a lot of stuff. And I don't know what Claudia would like to add to that, but you know, if you want to go to lunch, guys, let me know. I'll go again, because it was such a fun experience. And it was good to talk with all manner of people, staff and students, and then with Principal Miller leading the way. It was a great experience, and I would encourage any of you if you have an opportunity to do it, please do so. And if you need somebody to go with you, let me know.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Shields.
It was incredible. We got to see the 3 lunches go through the lunch line. And, you know, it felt like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, you know, we were just spinning around as these kids were going through. And it was really interesting. Kim was there and talked to us, and she pointed out, or maybe it was Principal Miller, that each lunch line cleared in about 5 minutes. It was incredible how quickly those kids, I mean, they knew what they wanted, they went in, they got it, they got out. It's so efficient, and it was so impressive. We also got to talk to Jessica, and I don't know what her last name, I don't remember her last name, Principal Miller, who is the learning specialist.
Yep, Jessica Young.
Jessica Young, okay. And she has moved up to the high school to work with reading, and has really focused on the 9th grade. Great work. I mean, that's just a tip of the iceberg of all the great work that's going on in the high school. But it was really great to have a few minutes to talk to her and know what she's doing, and how she's kind of roping in some seniors, because she's mostly her challenge is to identify 9th graders who need help and test and figure out where their gaps are. but she has also nabbed a few of the seniors who need help, and boy, I'd sure like to see more of that happening too. So anyway, it was a fantastic visit, and like Director Shields, I encourage any of you to go if you have a chance.
Excellent. I did hear mention of the budget committee vacancy. I noticed something on social media about that today. So those of you board members that are on social media, I'd love it if you could find that and go ahead and share that with your networks. Try to get it I think we have 2 vacancies currently on the budget committee. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have one member who wants to renew, but her term is up. So that's one applicant for the 2 positions so far, and we'd love to have many more. So yes, if you can put it out to your networks, community members, others will continue to talk to families and shoulder tap principals to do some reach out as well. So
Thank you. Vice Chair Shields.
Just along that lines, maybe, and we don't have to take time here. And Director Southerton, if you wanted to just spend a moment, after the meeting is adjourned, I do have something that I have a connection, but I don't know what to do about it, and I need some advice. So if we could connect after the meeting, doesn't have to be done at this time, but soon, because what is the deadline? Tell me again, the deadline for the budget committee applications coming up.
The end of next week is when we'd like to have them, so we can forward their applications to you all to review prior to the meeting.
So if we could connect like just real shortly after the meeting, that
works for me.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We didn't even take a break today. We spent a lot of time working on things, heavy things, fun things. I appreciate all of your time and attention. 8:51 p.m. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.